Your citizen status is not criminal. It's civil. And this is why I tell people, if they're residing here legally, then why aren't these people processed in criminal court? Why aren't they processed in criminal court? Explain it to me. I could tell you why they're not processing them in criminal court. Because in criminal court, based on the Constitution, you automatically have rights that are afforded to you, which includes having counsel provided to you, facing your accusers. Then it puts the burden on your accuser to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you did what you are accused of. These jokers can't prove immigration status, just like they can't prove eviction status. Immigration status, like eviction status, is handled in civil court. Why do they handle it in civil court versus criminal? One, because it's not illegal to reside in a place that you were once paying rent and you are no longer paying rent. It's not illegal. And it's not illegal to go to a whole nother country in looking for that better life. I mean, American dream. That's what they sell niggas on. Come here, you get the American dream. And then they get mad when the niggas come here to get that American dream. That's what you advertise. Falsely. But that's what you advertise. So please, help me understand. Like, what? And then people sit here and they regurgitate the same fallacies. If you hate immigrants, baby, you could just say that. You don't have to make up all this stuff, talk about their existence is illegal. That's not even possible here. And even if they were to make that a law, the whole point of the courts, you literally could sue for everything. You sue. And then you don't get a decision that you like, you appeal. And you keep appealing until you get the decision that you like. Because the whole point of the Supreme Court is to rule whether or not that the lower level, municipalities, because there's this thing called federalism, where the federal government is at the top. The local jurisdictions are at the bottom. And there's oversight. And the Supreme Court are to rule using scrutiny whether or not that the laws that they put in place violate. But we see in this raggedy country that nothing is permanent. We see with Roe v. Wade, one moment it's illegal. Then the next moment they pass legislation, Roe v. Wade, that protects women from getting abortions and stuff, to now they overturn it. This is what happens with laws. This is why the Bible tells you curses any man who put his trust in man. Man is infallible. They unstable in all their ways because they double-minded. One moment they own this, the next moment they own this. That's where all this motherfucking confusion and ambiguity comes from. But back to the immigrations, people wrongly attribute immigration as a criminal matter, and it's not. It's handled in a civil court. And it's strategically handled in civil court because the cops can scoop up everybody, arrest you, throw you away, and all that wonderful jazz. And then there's no one to question on the legalities of your arrest, especially once you have been deemed a deportable immigrant. There's no one that's going to check you. And in fact, they'll send you to a whole nother country. And then when you get to that whole nother country, that country going to treat you exactly how criminals are treated here in America. You get no rights. You get locked away. Nobody knows where you at. You don't get to communicate with nobody. And then you probably get thrown into the little incarceral motherfucking fights for profit that they got going on in there. Like it's the Gladiator or some trash. There's no one to question the legalities of your arrest, and now you just somewhere being violated. And this is what I wanted to talk about, because people, especially here in Rochester, people wrongly think like the police can get involved. Let me show you, because I did the research on it. And to be fair, it's the federal government that runs immigration status. It's not local law enforcement. Like I told you, it's impossible for police to participate in functions that is outside their jurisdiction when they still have their own jurisdictional duties. But let's look at this. Federal agencies are completely separate entities from local law enforcement agencies. Their missions vary, and it is impossible for one to do the other task with efficacy. Regarding immigration status, the federal government maintains jurisdiction and authority over its enforcement, whereas local law enforcement's scope of authority is solely making arrests for a small subset of criminal immigration violations. And then it says, although it was not quite clear on where local law enforcement agencies, also referred to as LLEAs, local law enforcement agencies, stood on enforcing immigration prior to now, because the law was quite vague about the role of local and state law enforcement agencies. Local law enforcement agencies have little to no legal involvement in immigration, let alone in civil matters. And I'm going to show you right here. And this is the source I use. So we are going to Google this motherfucking, this little boop. So that way you can see it's a motherfucking peer-reviewed article. Actually, what am I doing? Kashu 2009. What page is that? 3. Let's go all the way to my little Yas. Kashu 2009. The role of local police striking a balance between immigration enforcement and civil liberties. This is where I motherfucking found that from. Boom. And this is literally where I got that information from. My bad, y'all. So you can see it a little better. This is why I encourage y'all to motherfucking read. Pick up material and just read. Because you will be better informed when you just read. For God's people perish due to a lack of knowledge. Let's continue. It also says, the makeup of the jurisdiction that the varying law enforcement agency cover are: sheriffs preside over counties, police departments are over particular cities, whereas the United States Border Patrol and Customs Enforcement, aka ICE, which previously was referred to as INS, Immigration and Naturalization Service, had the responsibility of enforcing criminal and civil violations of immigration law, which includes, when they say criminal violations of immigration law, they are talking about actual crime that they take place. The civil violations includes their status as undocumented. It's not criminal to have undocumented status. It's civil. It's criminal to commit crime, like stealing, motherfucking robberies, you know what I'm saying, harassment, assaulting people, murder, rape, all that jazz, throwing projectiles. It says, despite there being minimal word of local and state police not assisting in immigration matters because of the federal government being capable, it was still possible to see local law enforcement agencies participating, even to a small degree. Modern immigration enforcement methods have stretched over to include internal controls. Local law enforcement agencies to target undocumented and deportable immigrants residing in the nation, within the nation's borders, despite immigration being limited to border control. These niggas done left the border and started harassing people past beyond the border. Jesus Christ. And then you always know who names about to pop up. It's either Reagan or Nixon. But here we talking about Ronald Reagan or Ronald Reagan. The Reagan Justice Department incited more cooperation from local law enforcement agencies in 1983. This was 40 years ago. And what these niggas doing now under Donald Trump's administration? The exact same thing. The Reagan Justice Department incited more cooperation from LLEAs, local law enforcement agencies, in 1983, which limited the role solely to notifying Immigration and Naturalization Services, known as INS, of immigrants suspected of being deportable. The support of this idea developed from the position that state law authorizes local law enforcers to enforce criminal provisions of federal law. So they can arrest in regards to criminality. State and local police could exercise their authority to enforce criminal provisions of federal immigration law. The source is Kashua, 2009 again. But it said, due to this dilemma, there was not any clarity on whether or not local law enforcement agencies are legally allowed to enforce, immigration policies. And I'm going to read this last paragraph and then I'm done, okay? Because y'all going to get this in my YouTube video. Then it says, however, about 10 years later, it was clarified and the purview of immigration fell onto the federal government. So, 1983, we were talking about how it wasn't really sure where local law enforcement stood in regards to the enforcement of immigration law, right? Then it says about 10 years later, it was clarified and the purview of immigration fell solely onto the federal government. So that literally stripped local law enforcement of any motherfucking jurisdiction. Because it solely fell on the federal government. Then it says post 2002 at a conference, Attorney General John Ashcroft announced a reversal of the DOJ's long-standing opinion, stating that the state and local officials have inherent authority to enforce federal immigration law. So this is post 2002, right? Then in Arizona versus United States 2012, it was reaffirmed that local law enforcement agencies are not authorized to stop or detain individuals for presumed violations of civil immigration law. I'm going to run that back for you. See, post 2002 at a conference, Attorney General John Ashcroft announced the reversal of the DOJ's longstanding opinion. So the longstanding opinion was that the purview, the jurisdiction of immigration solely reside with motherfreaking the federal government. In 2002, Attorney General John Ashcroft announced a reversal to that motherfreaking opinion, stating that state and local law enforcement have an inherent authority to enforce federal immigration law. Then, about another 10 years later, in Arizona v. United States, 2012, it was reaffirmed that the local law enforcement agents are not authorized to stop or detain individuals for presumed violations of civil immigration law. Also, the 10th Amendment bars coerced cooperation between local and state governments to enforce and adopt policies that are mandated by the federal government. So the federal government cannot force local law enforcement to help them. And it was ruled in 2012 that local law enforcement agencies, which include city and state police, are not authorized to stop nor detain individuals for presumed violations to citizen status as it pertains to the immigration law. So the people who want to sit here and say all this wild stuff, baby, pick up a book and read. That's all you got to do.
If you want people to think otherwise of you more positively, then give them more positive experiences.